Hey YouTube, in this video I'm going to be sharing some Pyraminx tips and tricks. So if you don't really know about me and Pyraminx, I'll just get that out of the way. Pyraminx is my favorite event, and on it I average in the mid to high 4-second area, so there are definitely people who are more suited to make this type of video, but I've been asked many times. I figured I'd just put online my advice for if you're trying to get kind of good at Pyraminx. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about in this video is hardware. So you need to get good hardware for Pyraminx. There aren't that many good Pyraminxes out there. At this point, I'd say the main one that people are going with is the Moyu, but there's also the Dion, which I think is my main at this point. I have taken the ball bearings out of it. I will have a review on that soon, but I'm pretty sure this is my main. And some people use the Shengxiao still. A lot of people mod their Shengxiaos, but generally I'm not a huge fan of this one, so I prefer to stick with either the Moyu or the Dion. And whichever one you do end up getting, it's good to experiment with lubing, tensioning, taking out ball bearings, modding, all that sort of stuff, because you really need to have a good Pyraminx to get good at Pyraminx. It's just one of those things that you need. So now I'm going to be going over the basic methods that you can use on Pyraminx. So they're either V-first and top-first methods. A lot of you probably know this already. A V-first method is just where you make a V, and then solve the rest however the method that you're using works. And then a top-first method is where you solve the top, so in other words, these centers, this tip, and these 3 edges. And then you solve the rest, which would be this big layer here. So personally, I use intuitive L4E, which is a V-first method. So I'm going to be going over V-first methods in this video, so if you don't use a V-first method and you're not interested in that at all, I'll put an annotation here where you can skip ahead to get to a different part of the video where I'll stop talking about that. So now I'm going to be going over the main 3 V-first methods that exist. So first I'm going to start out by solving this cube using the Bob Burton method, which is a really basic layer-by-layer method, and I'm just going to show you how that method works in case you didn't know already. So I'm just going to solve on green because I like green. And basically, you get the tips and centers, like that, on the green face. And then you solve a layer by putting edges in. This isn't really a tutorial, I'm just saying how the method works. And then after that, you go to another layer, so let's say blue, and then solve that. And then you go to another layer, let's say red, and solve that. Sometimes it takes 4 sides to solve, but generally you're not going to have to do more than 4. So that method you can probably get around 10 seconds with, but it's really inconsistent because you never know how many sides you're going to have to solve. I really don't recommend sticking with that method unless you just really don't care about Pyraminx and you just want to know how to solve it. So the next method I'm going to be going over is layer by layer. So this method is much more advanced and you can get to probably around 5 seconds with it. That's where I was before I switched to L4E, and you could probably get a little faster even. But generally it's better to switch to L4E at some point. So I'm going to solve on yellow this time because I see these 2 yellow edges here already. Basically the way this method works, once again, you solve a layer. So there's our layer. And then you're going to get 1 of 5 cases for this last layer. And then you solve that using an algorithm. So that method is pretty good. Like I said, it can get you to pretty fast speeds, very respectable speeds in Pyraminx, and it's only 5 algorithms to learn. They're all really easy. 4 of them are just mirrors of each other. So yeah, it's really, really easy to learn, and it's also a nice method because you can get pretty fast with it. So the next method I'm going to be showing you that's V-first is intuitive L4E, which is what I use. So this method is basically where you solve the V, and then you solve the rest. So it's really, really quick and easy, and it's like layer by layer, except instead of solving the entire layer, you leave out an edge, and then you solve the rest. So yeah, basically, like I said, you start out by solving a V, like that. Of course, the V has to be correct. So there you have that V, and then you're going to solve the rest. So I'm just going to show you an example, and then I'll actually explain how this method works in case you didn't know. Like that. So now the reason this is intuitive L4E is because there are not algorithms involved, which is actually really nice. So I'll just skip to where we have the V already, and I'll show you an example of what I would do. So here we have our V. What I would do from here is look at the edge that's in here, which in this case is red and blue. So basically what you want to do is take this edge out and put it in the back right here. So the way I would do that is like that. And then that edge is in the back solved in between its centers. So you need to have the edge solved like that. And then from there, sometimes you'll have to do a sledgehammer like that. In this case, you don't have to. Sometimes you just have to do an insertion like that. Once again, you don't have to. In this case, it's this really awkward kind of sideways sledge like that. And then it's solved. So you're basically just going to need, if you want to learn this method, it's really intuitive. So I don't recommend just learning algorithms for it. There are like, if you wanted to, there are like 20-something algorithms you could learn for each case. But in my opinion, it's a lot better to understand what the algorithms are doing as opposed to just learning them randomly and then applying them when necessary. So like here, you can do the sledgehammer, and then it's solved. You just need to learn stuff like that, how different 4-move inserts affect other stuff. And basically, you just want to have one solved edge and then a 4-move insert. So it's probably going to be about 7 moves per case. So it's a really nice method, and it got me to sub 5, high 4, mid 4 area. But I have seen people who are around like mid 3s, low 3s with that, so you can definitely get like world class with this method. And this isn't really going to be a tutorial on L4E, because it's one of those things that you just kind of need to see a few example solves, and then you'll understand it. That's how I did it. I didn't learn from a tutorial, I just watched people do a few solves on it, and I'll have a few solves of that at the end of this video. But it's one of those things, like I said, you just need to understand how it works, and then eventually you'll get it. So now I'm going to be talking about block building. Now you may have seen me doing some of this in my example solves that I just showed, but basically what block building is, it's very important in any v-first method. It's basically when you're solving the centers of the first layer that you're doing, you are also getting edges in at the same time, which is really nice. So in this case, I'm solving on red. As you can see, we have the red tips all here. So I see this red and green edge that's already in place. So I'm not going to do this first, because that moves it out of place. And I'm not going to do this first, because then when we move this center down, that edge is out of place. So what I'm going to do is get this center down like that, put this edge in, and then bring that center down. So we already have an edge once we're done with centers. But there's another thing we could have done here too, and this is something that just comes with practice. I see this red and yellow edge here. So before I put anything in, I might put this edge and pair it up here. So we already have 2 edges. Then I'd put this center down, move this over, put this center down, and move it back there. So then we already have the V, and then we just do our L4E case like that. So that's something that's very important, even if you use layer by layer, not L4E, or the Bob Burton method. It's really important to just understand how block building works. Just try to get edges in while you're solving centers. It's very important to getting fast at Pyraminx. So now it's time to talk about inspection. Basically, what do you do when a box is lifted up in front of you and you see this messed up Pyraminx? So the thing you want to look for in inspection is basically just how you're going to start solving this cube. So it's best to look for how you're going to block build in inspection, which can be very useful. Like right here, if I was doing green, I see this edge already in. So when I'm solving, I might take it out and do that sort of thing. So it's still in there. You don't need to one-look solves on Pyraminx. That's very hard to do, but it's definitely possible. I know some world-class Pyraminxers can definitely do that. But it's definitely good to see very far ahead into your solves and make good use of inspection. So I'm going to show you what, in my opinion, good use of inspection would be. So here, the first thing I would see is this nice pair here, which is very good to put in like that and keep this edge in. So then, before I'm even turning it, I would see this edge here, which when we bring it up, puts it in place. So basically, we would have our V done in 2 moves like that, which is really nice. And just there are a lot of things you can see in inspection in Pyraminx. Just whatever you can look for, try to figure out how you're going to start your solve, and really plan as far ahead as possible. And if it's a really easy V or a really easy first layer, try your best to look ahead and see what last layer case or L4E case you're going to get, because that can definitely help to improve your times. A general rule for Pyraminx that you want to follow is to never turn the same side more than once, because you can just turn it the other way and get it in the same position. So if you turn it twice, it's the same thing as turning it this way once, just because it takes 3 times to go around a Pyraminx, which is pretty obvious, but it is something that a lot of people mess up on. So if you have this sort of case, and you do that, it's a lot easier to do that than it is to end by doing that sort of thing. So sometimes it's easier to finger trick by doing it twice. I'd do that for like one case, but in general, it's just more move efficient and like easier to just do it once. Tips. These things are very annoying, but not when you know how to handle them. On Pyraminx, tips are just so pointless. They don't affect anything else when you're turning them, and they seem to be there just to get in your way. So when you're doing Pyraminx, you need to figure out a good way to get tips done, because otherwise you're going to have really slow times just because of those tips that are wasting like 5 seconds at the beginning of your solve. There are a lot of ways to get tips done, but what you should not do is this. Okay, that was a big waste of time on those tips at the end. There were a lot of places, even in the middle of the solve, that I could have just gotten some of those out of the way, so at the end of the solve I might have only needed to do 1 or 2 tips. So just keep in mind how you're handling those tips, because that is a very crucial part of Pyraminx that nobody really likes, but everyone has to figure out a way to deal with. So I'll show you some random tips for the tips right now. So let's look at this case. Say we're solving yellow. This is the yellow side right here. We have this tip here unsolved, and this tip here unsolved, and this tip in the back. What I like to do generally is solve at least 3 tips in the beginning of making my V, and then maybe save the last one for the end of the solve. So what I would do here, I would do this to start off the solve, which you can also practice that by doing this sort of thing with the Pyraminx, which is really fun. But I would start out my solve by doing this, and then bringing that up. So you already have 3 tips done. Well, we just did 2, and it was only a 3-tip scramble. And then you can just finish the solve, and then the last tip, in this case, we can just do that, where you hold on to the tip and move like a slice move sort of thing. Look ahead is very important in Pyraminx solves, no matter what method you use. I'm not even going to be showing an example solve or anything like that for this part, because this just applies in general to every single method. So you really want to get to know how everything you do on the Pyraminx affects every other piece. So I might know how a sledgehammer works, or how normal insertion works, and things like that. It's really nice to just know those basic things about how a Pyraminx works. So you should just really spend some time, not even timing yourself, getting to know how Pyraminx algorithms work, what they affect. It's not something that can even really be taught, it's just something that you need to spend time with your Pyraminx and get to know it really well and become best friends with it for life. And when you do become best friends with your Pyraminx for life and you can understand how things will affect it, you can use look ahead to determine how one algorithm will produce a certain outcome, and maybe you don't want to use that algorithm because that outcome isn't what you like, and maybe there's a better algorithm to just get a nice case that you want to get. So look ahead is really important on Pyraminx, especially because it's such a short solve that if you spend time looking for pieces and things like that, you're just going to be wasting those precious seconds that you need. And the final Pyraminx tip I have for you is just to practice. Because the more you practice with Pyraminx, the more you understand it, the faster your times are going to get, no matter what method you're using. But you just need to practice, understand the Pyraminx. It's the same as with any other event. The more you practice, the faster your times are going to get. And really, that's all there is to it. So that's all I have for you in this Pyraminx tips and tricks video. I hope this video came out kind of good. I really hope I can help some people out with Pyraminx because it is just an awesome event. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Pyraminx is a really great event. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of dedication, and sometimes it doesn't. What am I even saying?